This is the SwitchBot Lock Pro, which is a brand new smart lock that, in my opinion, is a major upgrade over its predecessor. Just based off the packaging and the design of the device itself alone, you can tell that SwitchBot really took their time with this one. And if you look at them side by side, I think that you would agree with me that this new design is a lot more minimal, sleek, and overall just not as big as the original SwitchBot lock. In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the Lock Pro's brand new features, how to install it, how to use it, and just compare the overall differences between this one and the previous one. Let's get started. Okay, so firstly, this is a retrofit lock, which means that it does not replace the entire door lock. You're gonna actually use it in conjunction with your existing door hardware. And that means that this works perfectly for both homeowners and for renters because you're only gonna have to change the inside section of the lock. The outside is gonna remain exactly the same. One nice feature that I really like about the Lock Pro is that it's actually going to screw into your existing hardware. Previously on the standard lock, you had to use an adhesive strip to mount it to your door, which did work great and I didn't really have any issues with that. But the fact that this one is screwed on just gives it a little bit of an extra security measure because you'll never have to worry about it falling off. And honestly, the install for this lock was very easy and pretty quick. All that you do is unscrew the inside section of your deadbolt. They actually give you a little bit of tape that you're going to use to tape the outside hardware to your door so that nothing falls off when you take the inside part out. Once you unscrew and take off the existing hardware for your thumb turn, you take the mounting bracket for the Lock Pro and put it up against the door. You're just going to screw in that mounting plate to the exact same holes that you used with your previous thumb turn. And the Lock Pro does come with all the hardware that you need, screws, mounting bracket, tape, etc. Basically anything to customize this lock to your door will be in the box. I did find though that the screws that came with this lock didn't actually work for my specific door because they were a little bit too long, but I just ended up using the same screws that were already installed on the door and that worked perfectly. Once the base plate is installed, you just push the lock onto the base plate and it clicks into place. There are also some mounting screws that you want to screw in after that using the little hex wrench that they provide, but once you put those in, this thing is very sturdy and secure on the door. And that is it for the install. After that, you can start using the lock as normal. You do also have the option when you're purchasing this lock to get the SwitchBot Hub Mini, which if you do choose to do that might be a good idea because this thing is Matter enabled, meaning that not only will you have a SwitchBot Hub so that you can set up more automations with other SwitchBot products, but you will also be able to natively integrate this lock into HomeKit. So if you do use HomeKit, being that this is Matter enabled, I would recommend getting it. Connecting this lock to the app is also very simple. It'll have a blinking light to indicate that it's in pairing mode. You open up your SwitchBot app, you press the little plus sign at the top, and it should automatically detect it. You just go through a few of the prompts on the screen to calibrate the lock, which is basically just making sure that it closes your door properly. The calibration is honestly very simple. You just follow the prompts on the screen and then test it to make sure that it's all working properly. You will also have to install this little magnet on the door frame so that the lock can detect whether the door is opened or closed, and this basically just gives you an extra functionality because it makes the lock also act as a door sensor, and it does have built-in functions to alert you if the door is left open or left unlocked. You can have the lock itself make a sound, and you can also have it notify you on your phone. And by the way, if it wasn't obvious, this lock is also battery powered, which is another major upgrade that it received because now you can just use 4 standard AA batteries to power it. Previously, you had to use some more obscure batteries, that CR123As, which are not as common to have in a household, but now with this, you can just use standard AA batteries, disposable or rechargeable. Alternatively, SwitchBot did also create their own brand new battery pack for this system as well, which basically are just rechargeable batteries that fit perfectly in those AA spots. You can include this with your lock optionally, you don't have to, but this does make it a lot easier than using disposable batteries. And honestly, I was just really impressed by the battery system as a whole. I loved that the little door that you have to open to access the batteries is magnetic because it makes it look very sleek, but it's also very easy to gain access to the batteries. But yeah, as you can tell, the install was very simple to do, and it's just a very smooth process overall to install this lock. So using the lock is very easy. As you can tell, it doesn't have the traditional thumb turn that basically any deadbolt or smart lock has. This one actually has a neural dial, which kind of surprised me at first because it's just so different than what you normally see on locks like this. The dial is no harder to turn than a regular thumb turn is, and honestly it might be even easier because the mechanism is super smooth. It's very easy to open and close the Lock Pro. And they did add a brand new way to unlock the door, which is a new feature called Quick Key. The whole circular face of the dial is actually a button which you can press and have the door automatically open or close for you. Now at first I didn't even know this was a feature. I was using it just by turning it for the first couple of days. I just happened to think, hey, maybe that's a button. I pressed it and it was, and honestly that's all that I've been using ever since. I didn't really expect to, but after using this lock for about a month now, the Quick Key is actually the only way that I tend to open or close it. It's just a lot easier for me to press a button and then reach for the handle, because by the time I'm at the handle, the door is unlocked and I can go. It doesn't really seem like it would save time, but it at least feels like it is because I'm not having to turn it and then reach for the handle afterwards. Plus, the Quick Key is honestly really nice for accessibility too. If you don't have the ability to twist with a thumb and a finger, or if you're going to the door and your hands are completely full, maybe you can only touch it with your elbow, it gives you a very easy way to unlock the door without having to have a free hand. Now, one of the things that I like best about this lock, like I said before, is that it's a retrofit, meaning that the outside lock stays exactly the same. And what that means is that you can use the same key that you've been using on your door and still have the smart functionality on the inside. And that's also a very nice feature for tenants or anyone who rents a place, because you don't have to change anything on the outside where it might be visible, but you can still add that smart home functionality to the inside of the house. And obviously there are several ways to use this lock. So if you don't feel like taking out your key every time you get home, the first and most obvious way is you can open up the app, just press a button and have it unlock for you. Now, if you have one, you do also have the option to use this lock with a SwitchBot remote, which is something that you'll want to keep on the inside of the house. But if, for example, you're expecting someone to come over, your door is locked, and you're working in your office, you hear a knock at the door, instead of getting up to open the door, you can just press the button and have it unlock for you while you keep working. And as with basically any smart home product these days, you do also have the ability to pair this with voice assistants. So for example, you can ask Alexa or Siri to lock the front door. Lock the SwitchBot lock.
Locking the office.
Otherwise, another optional feature that you have with the Lock Pro is you actually do have the ability to order this with a numpad that has a fingerprint sensor. Now this one has also been a very nice feature for me because I don't like to carry around my phone or my keys if I don't absolutely have to. And if I'm just doing stuff around the house and I want to leave and lock the door, I can easily just come back and just type in a code, or even better is use the fingerprint sensor to unlock the door. That way you can go around without having to worry about whether you have your phone or your keys on you. And it's very easy to pair the keypad with the lock. It's basically the same thing that we went over previously. One other way to open it is that this keypad is actually NFC enabled, and they do include an NFC card in the box so that you can actually have a little key card like you would at a hotel, for example, press it up against the keypad and have the door unlock without having to scan a fingerprint or type in a code. Now this is a really nice feature if you're wanting to give someone temporary access to the lock, because if you run an Airbnb or a Vrbo and you want to give your guests the ability to get in and out of the lock easily, you just give them this NFC card and you can give them temporary access. And that is the same with the other methods on the keypad too, so you can create temporary passwords or fingerprints that only work for a set amount of time. Now, putting ways to unlock it aside, one of the best features about having a smart lock at all is the ability to auto lock your door. And this obviously is no different. So you can walk out of your door and have it automatically lock the door after a set interval of time, which you can choose. You can make it shorter or longer just based on your preference, but that way you can always be sure that your door is locked when you leave the house. And on that point, you can also create automations in the SwitchBot app so that you can have the door automatically lock itself every night at the same time, again, just to give you a bit of peace of mind and security. That all being said, I would also like to go over a few of the cons or drawbacks for this lock, and to be honest, there really wasn't much. I really have had a good experience using this lock overall, but there were just a few things that I'd like to mention. First and foremost is that this lock isn't going to fit absolutely every door. That's actually one of the main benefits benefits of the previous version of the SwitchBot lock is that since it has that adhesive strip and you don't have to screw it into your door hardware, I do think that it's a lot more versatile to make it fit with almost every lock out there. With the Lock Pro, I would say it most definitely will fit with the most popular lock types, but with my situation, I'm actually currently renting an apartment where they do not have standard door locks, and the lock that I have on the front door of my apartment was not compatible at all with this lock. The system was just entirely different. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, but I wouldn't think it's very likely that you're going to run into any issues with compatibility. And even if you do have some of the less common lock types, like a jimmy-proof lock for example, you can actually reach out to SwitchBot support, and they do have the ability to send you extra parts to make this lock compatible with those less common door types. One other thing to note is that this lock is actually so slim that it didn't fully cover the hole on my door when I installed it. It's barely noticeable, but you can see it if you look pretty close that the lock is not fully covering the hole that was allowed for the deadbolt. So that is another thing to consider, because you obviously want to make sure you have a good seal on the lock so that you're not letting any outside air or bugs into your house. But if you look at that a different way, that does also show that this lock is a lot more sleek and slim than it was previously. Lastly, I just wanted to give a quick recap in case you're trying to decide which lock to go with. These are the main differences between the standard SwitchBot lock and the SwitchBot Lock Pro. Firstly, and probably most noticeable, is the design. The standard SwitchBot lock, in my opinion, just doesn't have as sleek or as modern of a design as the Lock Pro. They're actually made out of different materials too. So with the standard lock, you do have a lot more plastic than you do metal, versus with the Lock Pro, it's almost entirely made of an aluminum magnesium alloy. You can even tell the differences in design just off the box alone on these. The standard SwitchBot lock is just like the other SwitchBot products, but the box for the Lock Pro is just a significant difference. It just looks very sleek, very modern, and I think you just get an overall more elevated experience with the Lock Pro. Outside of design, there are definitely some differences in functions as well. One of the main ones being that new quick key feature. So again, on the standard SwitchBot lock, you have a regular thumb turn that you can open as normal from the inside. With the Lock Pro, you have the new knurled dial, which in my opinion is a little bit easier to use because it's smaller in diameter, and you have the quick key feature. So if you don't want to have to turn it, or if you have any accessibility issues, you can just press the button on the front of it to have it automatically unlock for you. A major difference between these two is the installation, because with the standard SwitchBot lock, you basically just adhere it to the door face itself with an adhesive strip. You don't actually screw anything in. It just adheres to the door and turns your existing thumb turn. Whereas with the Lock Pro, you are going to have to uninstall your previous hardware on the inside of the door and screw this new hardware in. Now, don't be intimidated by that. If you're someone who hasn't really done a project like this before, it is extremely simple to install the Lock Pro, but that is something to consider if you don't want to have to deal with unscrewing anything, or if you're just in a situation where that's not an option. The standard lock might be a better option just because you only have to adhere it to the door. Now, in terms of actually opening the door, the Lock Pro actually has 2 times the amount of torque as you have with the standard SwitchBot lock. In my case, I have not had any issues with opening doors on either one of the models, but if you do have an older door, or maybe just something that's a lot harder to lock and unlock, then the Lock Pro would be the better choice. Now, the Lock Pro does also have a nice feature called low battery unlock, which means that if the batteries are running low on the lock, it does reserve just enough power to unlock the door, which is not a feature on the standard lock. Lastly, as far as differences go, is the battery system. And honestly, this is a major one in my opinion, because with the Lock Pro, you can now just use 4 standard AA batteries, or if you choose to, you can get the even better option, which is their in-house battery system that they created that works perfectly with the lock. Again, the second option is rechargeable, so you will be creating less waste if you don't use disposable batteries, but even if you end up using the AA batteries, those are still a lot easier to find than what you have to use on the standard SwitchBot lock. So yeah, those are the major differences between the two. Some of the main functions of the lock are going to be the same regardless of which one you choose. You'll still have the auto lock, you'll still have several ways to unlock or lock it remotely, and if you do end up getting a Matter enabled hub, they will both be Matter and HomeKit enabled. If you're interested in checking out the Lock Pro, I will have my affiliate links in the description, and SwitchBot is offering some really good promos on this right now since it's a brand new product launch. You can get $20 off on their website. If you prefer to order on Amazon, I'll have a link for that down in the description as well. Big thank you to SwitchBot for sponsoring this video and sending this lock for me to review, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Nice.